It is the 4th of January, 1963. Those who are left behind. It had been a few days since Comrade Karbashev took his walk to the woods, and he did not return. Yet, today, Yazov took his usual seat next to the old man's side, waiting for his turn. Today, too, the fields were noisy with men training for the trial. The two cups sat in the cold, their steam streaming into the air in smooth wisps before dissipating. He leaned back in his chair, growing sleepy as worry and concern faded from the creases of his face. Comrade Karbashev was not so weak that a chilly wind could kill him. He would return and lead the League to glory. He squinted. Now was not the moment to grow complacent. What would the man think of him if he found Yazov dozing off before their appointed meeting? Yazov sat up, his elbows on his knees, tapping his fingers as the hours passed and the day stretched to the evening. The cold breeze blew between the trees, and the training field grew silent as men trooped to dinner and other martial business. The stern clouds looked to the earth and seemed to grow grayer and grayer in disappointment or wrath. Still, Karbashev did not appear. He was old, however, and maybe his creaky joints made him late. Yazov laughed, but it was hollow. Aides and officers came out of the offices, begging him to return to his quarters. A storm grew in the distance, and the clouds grew stark, steely in outlook. The sun went down, and snow fell. First, in a gentle dusting, then as a thick, heavy blanket. The cool breeze became lashes of frozen air. Still, Yazov sat, waiting, his fingers clasped together, breathing with every shiver and shock. An aide, braving through the harsh weather, came beside him. Yazov was still. "Sir," the aide said, "it might be time to rest. You will sadden Comrade Karbashev deeply if he returns." Yazov stood, gathering all his strength to speak amid the din of the storm. Yazov spoke in a weak and broken voice. "Yes, I will rest now. Thank you, comrade." The only word Comrade Karbashev could not keep. It is the 9th of January, 1963. A terrible day for rain. The rain poured upon the silent streets of Omsk as the procession marched through the streets, the drumming of rain upon gravel and boot upon stone, drowning out all life. In the center of the column of wordless soldiers, a simple wooden coffin rested upon the hands of a chosen few. As they marched through the city, a flash of light momentarily lit the stony faces of those marching before a crushing boom of thunder echoed overhead. At the front of the column, arms aching, bearing the weight of the left side of the coffin upon his shoulders, marched Dmitri Yazov. He was grateful for the night and for the rain, for it would let none see the tears as they flowed freely down his cheeks. He was still garbed in the uniform of General Karbashev's closest follower, not a leader, just a follower. As the procession passed apartment block after block, the residents, garbed in their own uniforms, filed orderly out of their homes and joined the procession. Not a word was spoken among the men and women of the Black League as they marched their great general's body through the streets. They marched for what seemed hours, out of the city proper and past the training fields. And along the way, more and more people joined the march. For one night, they would put their differences aside. For one night, the entire Black League stood united in mourning. Eventually, they reached their destination. The highest hill in the land the League controlled, a suitable final resting place for the man that had given so much for them. Yazov exhaled deeply as he knelt with the others carrying the coffin, lowering it oh so gently down into the tomb. A single, choked sob left his throat before he stood, gazing at the assembled Black League before him. A small podium had been arranged just behind the grave. He walked, unsteadily at first, then confidently, then, with utter calm, to the podium. He looked down at those people below. The Black League watched him with complete attention, each man and woman standing rapt and alert. In his heart of hearts, Yazov knew then that it was not over. He turned on the microphone and began to speak. Soldiers, workers, comrades, lend your general your ears. It is the 20th of January, 1963. The work ahead. The closest thing to a father Dmitry Yazov had ever known was dead. As the plain, unmarked casket was dropped unceremoniously into the ground, rain cascading around it, and the supposed honor guard lazily shoveling clumps of mud into the grave, Yazov's gaze fell to his clenched, shaking fist. It took all he had to restrain himself. He had hoped, foolishly he now knew, that with his ascension as general, he would finally be able to make some change. Perhaps the rot within the League's officers would dissipate with the promotion of a fresh young face. Obviously, Yazov reflected bitterly, he was wrong. For the most part, anyway. A precious few had slowly but surely become subservient to him, which granted Yazov an advantage he refused to relinquish. He strode away from the funeral, boots splashing against the mud. There is much to be done. General Karbashev, the hero of Russia, founder of the Black League, and mentor of Dmitry Yazov, has died. In his place, General Yazov rises like a phoenix, ready to avenge his teacher's manipulation by the officer cliques plaguing the League, and above all, ready to battle the Hun one last time. While those who caused the League's very rot bemoan the general's succession and decry his influence, plotting in the shadows, they forget one thing. General Yazov is not his forefather. These worms will be exposed for the scum they are, and crushed under his boot. There can be no other outcome. It is the 22nd of January, 1963. The enemy is defeated. Recent reports have been sent in of an overwhelming victory against a recent party of raiding bandits. In a brutal standoff, they were decimated by our valiant defense forces, and now their bodies lie scattered and mutilated by war, with survivors dashing for cover and retreating into the misty frontiers. Our soldiers chant songs of victory and heroism in the face of invading evil. The rush of bloody defeat will certainly teach them a lesson about attacking the lands of Omsk for years to come. Now, on to cleaning up the corpses. It is the 26th of January, 1963. Against the grain. Gentlemen, Yazov intoned, I am honored by your presence and your willingness to listen to me. Of course, Yazov was perfectly aware that many of the men in the room would prefer to see him shot than listen to someone they regarded as an upstart firebrand. Yet, he carried on. As the new Glapkoverk of the Black League, I would like to make it clear how I intend to exercise my new role. Yazov took a deep breath. In the last days of our dearly departed Comrade Karbashev, there was no respect for authority among the higher ranks of our organization. Our founder, a living example of the principles we all seek to emulate, was ignored and regarded as little more than a figurehead. His wise counsel was spurned, and our mission corrupted by bureaucratic cliques. He could see the discontent evident among some of the men seated before him, but he carried on. While I have no intention to punish those responsible for this system, I certainly do not intend to let it continue. Yazov glanced to the side, at Sakharovsky and the others he had brought with him. I have at my side a staff of eminently capable officers and generals, and with their help, as well as, I hope, yours, I intend to make this organization into something of which our dear Dmitry Mikhailovich would be proud. Yazov had long imagined the moment and the satisfaction it might bring. The heady rush of making a fateful decision manifest with carefully chosen words. But no such feeling came, and as Yazov met Abakumov's hateful, beady-eyed stare, a sickening, head-spinning realization washed over him. There was no turning back now. The Rubicon had been crossed, and this was war. It is the 27th of January, 1963. Ending the corruption. Are you really sure about this, sir? Yazov glared at the officer holding the new memo he had just finished typing. The young man seemed to shrink away from his gaze, clutching the piece of paper in front of him like a pathetic shield. Did I stutter, Lieutenant? No. Of course not, sir. It's just that, well, this seems exceptionally harsh to me. Dozens of executions, hundreds of arrests. Some of these people are the most senior members of the League. Can we really afford to get rid of them? Every person on that list is a coward and a thief, and most of them are traitors too. The Black League has no place for them anymore, and we must show the members of the League what happens to those who obstruct our progress. Now, I would encourage you to deliver that memo as fast as you possibly can, if you don't want to be considered an obstructionist yourself. The lieutenant opened his mouth to reply, then thought better of it, snapped a quick salute, and almost sprinted out the door. It brought Yazov a small amount of satisfaction to see the fear in the man's eyes. Respect was all well and good, but fear was the best way to ensure obedience. Karbyshev had been a wise man, but he had failed to realize that. He had placed his trust in people who had exploited and abused him. Yazov was not so forgiving, as those scum were about to find out. Before Russia can be redeemed, the Black League must be. It is the 29th of January, 1963. The low overcomes the high. Existence is subjugation. Yazov let this line hang in the air for a few seconds before carrying on. It is the subjugation of reality to one's own desire to exist. Nothing can be achieved without such power, and without such power, one lives only at the mercy of those who are stronger. As grim a reality as it may be, we must recognize that there is no inherent right to existence, to life. We can only rely on ourselves. The simple fact is this: ideals have failed Russia. It is systems of ideals that place unworthy people in positions of power. In the First World War, Russians bled and died for the sake of an incompetent man who had done nothing to merit leadership. In the Second, they did the same, only for different men. We have seen the products of such systems and paid the price for their failures, but no more. Yazov paused. He knew what was coming. His stomach clenched. But he knew there was no other way. It was what Karbyshev would have wanted. This is what he had to be. The Black League's sole objective is the survival of Russia in the face of the coming trial. To do this, we cannot make the same mistakes as our predecessors. Going forward, weakness in leadership will not be tolerated. I am hereby issuing a decree allowing the removal from command of ineffective officers. From this day forward, any official, no matter how high-ranking, can be brought before a court-martial by the consent of 10 of his direct subordinates and another officer. The lawless wasteland permits only the strong to survive. We will bring this principle into our leadership in order that the new Russia we are building may be sharpened into a weapon which no amount of German bombs can break. We must make the Russian the apex predator of the Eurasian continent. This is your commander speaking. Our cause is just. Victory will be ours. Good night. Storm clouds loom. It is the 30th of January, 1963. The right hand. Evgeny Savintsev was the kind of man that you wanted on your side. A massive, aggressive brute. He began his career in the army as a special forces man. Trained in forced entry tactics, he was nevertheless not a quiet man. When he entered the room, you felt his presence. His feet could be heard stomping the hallway away. Still, the man was intelligent. Whenever Dmitry Yazov was away, plotting, or doing business, Savintsev was right behind him, plotting in tandem. The two were twins, separated at birth, both able to come to the same conclusions at the same times. Some even dared to say they were friends. That kind of talk was frowned upon for supreme leaders. A promising young recruit, Savintsev poses a formidable challenge to anyone who sees the aging leadership of Omsk and decides that perhaps it would not be a hard state to topple. We shall see, ultimately. It is the 31st of January, 1963. Revolts in Iskikul and Tara. As of this morning, the Black League's garrisons in the outlying towns of Iskikul and Tara have done the unthinkable and openly rebelled against Omsk's authority. Seeking the overthrow of newly minted Supreme Commander Yazov, the officer cliques have seized control of both towns in what is a clear bid to take command of the whole of the Black League. While there is undoubtedly some reason being used by the officers to justify the revolt, at this time, no formal statement has been issued. In any case, such a pretext matters little. Yazov has made his intention to remove these aging, inefficient officers eminently clear. And it can be assumed that the mutineers are fighting first and foremost for their own careers. Exactly who is in command of the revolt is unclear. While the uprising in Iskikul is reportedly headed by one General V.S. Avakumov, an NKVD veteran who joined the Black League in its early days, it is still uncertain who, if anyone, is actually leading the rebellion in Tara. Regardless, this turn of events represents a dire situation for the Black League as a whole, and it seems the whole organization now hangs from the precipice. The desperate acts of selfish men. It is the 3rd of February, 1963. Running the gauntlet. Comrade Supreme Commander! Gunshots and shouts echoed from the floor below, as internal security agents reasserted control over some cadres that had apparently gone rogue. I'm aware, Yazov stated curtly. He sent the aide out of the room with a wave of his hand as his mind roiled. If only Karvashev were here. I'm not ready for this, he thought, before swatting the errant thought out of his mind. Truth be told, while on the exterior he was quite adept at putting forth a brave face. Within, the pressure was nearly overwhelming. He couldn't help but feel like a child, dressed up in his father's work clothes, the weight of the world on his unready shoulders. These thoughts were interrupted when General Sakharovsky burst in. Glavkovsk, he said breathlessly. We have work to do. So it would seem, Alexander Mikhailovich, Yazov replied, trying his best to exude the confidence that he lacked as he stood up from his desk and gathered his things. Mobilize everyone we've got, even the RSBs, lock down the city. Once we're in control, we plan our next move. Sakharovsky nodded and summoned an aide. Yazov felt decisive. He imagined himself like Karvashev, always in control, ready to run the gauntlet and come out unscathed. But within, he had no idea what was going to happen next. A step into the unknown. It is the 5th of February, 1963. Under lock and key. The night the lockdowns began in Omsk was a grand painting, dyed forever upon the canvas of history. A sky of somber black was smeared over the city on that malignant night, punctuated only by stars and the blighted smog that strangled their light. Omsk was as it always was, a mournful husk of what once had been, the shattered bones of an old world painted across the horizon, reaching up to the heavens, but forever trapped with the discarded people who had built them in the past age. But, over top of the city, a layer of atmosphere was brushed thick. Air raid sirens painted it in broad strokes of oppression and fear. The wash of crackled words, murmured through half-broken speakers, demanding the citizens return to their homes, mixed anxiety into the palate. Lower down, in the dark bowels of the city, the composition was ongoing. Thousands of dark-clothed oppressors, each one a brush, painted their heavy boots across the streets. All those wide-eyed rabble, viewing the great scene from their windows, could do nothing but accept the artistry before them. Yazov had become the grand painter of the city, perhaps all of Russia, and soon the old guard would drown under a layer of vengeful black ink. And like a painting, the old guard shall hang. It is the 7th of February, 1963. The Battle of Omsk. None doubt that Yazov will emerge from this struggle as the undisputed leader of the Black League, except for a small number of fools. Unfortunately, they happen to be well-armed and motivated fools. The routes out of the city have been blocked off, and patrols routed through the countryside to catch any who manage to trickle out through less conventional means. Soldiers, enforcers, and bloodhounds sniff through the city, finding each and every stubborn pocket of the old guard. It costs lives to burn them out of their holes, but we are prepared to pay the price without complaint. With scores of soldiers surging into any traitorous bastions we find, it's only a matter of time before the city is ours. A new day for Omsk. It is the 9th of February, 1963. The city secured. The streets of Omsk are silent once more. Dmitry Yazov, heir to Karvashev, and the newly installed Glavkovurk of the Black League, has defeated an initial attempt by conservative officer cliques to dethrone him and derail his plans for radical reform within the Black League. As the last Old Guard holdouts within Omsk itself surrender to loyalist forces and are led away to either redemptionary service or the firing squad, it seems that Yazov's new order has survived its first real test. As the dust settles in the Black League's capital, all eyes are now on the uprisings by conservative officers in the outlying towns of Iskakul and Tara, which still threaten to strangle the Glavkovurk's Darwinian vision in its crib. Survival of the fittest. We must not forget the original purposes of the redemptionary brigades. They are not a dumping ground for petty political rivalries, but a chance for those who have committed crimes against Russia, or those who aided the Teuton in the past to redeem themselves through the shedding of blood. Henceforth, General Yazov has declared that the course of the redemptionary brigades will be righted immediately. Across the lands of the League, thieves and criminals will be given this new start, as will any other lost souls we may find in the future. The one exception for this benevolent rule is, of course, the Germanic Teuton. After all, you don't give a disease the chance to redeem itself. You stamp it out. It is the 13th of February, 1963. A quiet op. In this moment, lying prone in a segment of sewer pipe on the 5th floor of the construction site that had laid fallow since the days of Bukharin, Kentley felt oddly comfortable. Not physically. It was cramped, damp, and smelled of mold, but in a more existential sense. This kind of war, the kind he now felt himself immersed in, was something he could rationalize and understand. The last few weeks of chaos and civil disorder had been disorienting, vertigo-inducing sequence of events for Kentley, a veteran of the failed effort to reclaim West Russia in the 1950s. The war that was now being fought was nothing like the one he had waged 10 years ago. The conflict within the Black League came and went in its fits and starts, with brief engagements interspersed within long, endless hours and days of tension and speculation. The front lines seemed to appear and disappear at will, as political machinations within the higher ranks made foes suddenly become friends and vice versa. Rarely could Kentley enjoy the adrenaline rush of a straight fight, or the feeling of a well-executed infiltration. But today was such a day, and, as he looked at the bunker complex a few broken city blocks away, he couldn't help but feel quite pleased with himself. A distant thud from within the compound let Kentley know that his work had come to a bloody fruition, in one way or another. The handoff of the explosive-laden briefcase last night had gone off without a hitch, and it seemed that his contact had successfully set off the device, at least. It wasn't until the appointed signal, a staccato series of 6 gunshots, in groups of 3, that Kentley knew that Viktor Abakumov was dead. Target liquidated. A new dawn has risen over Omsk and the League. For too long we have been nothing but a petty officers' club, an undisciplined rabble constantly devouring, goring, battling itself. General Yazov's iron fist will be brought down upon the ruffians like a hammer, and any that dare stand against the new order will be run into the ground. If General Karbyshev made a mistake, it was that he was too merciful. It is the 14th of February, 1963. New prospects. All I'm saying is, I liked things better when we spent all day chopping down trees, and all the new arrivals were washed-up politicians and bureaucrats that pissed off the wrong person. These new guys look like criminals. You're telling me you would have preferred to spend the rest of your life toiling away in a prison camp and not have a chance to work your way out of here? Hey, back in the prison camp, there wasn't a very real chance we were going to die. Now we're basically cannon fodder, and anyone who accidentally survives might get promoted into the Black League. We're not cannon fodder. We get treated as well as the regular soldiers. This may come as a shock to you, Andreev, but they're cannon fodder too. Saying shit like that is how you wound up here in the first place. I just wish we were still allowed to actually work off our death to the League, rather than having to risk dying for it. Are you saying you wouldn't lay down your life for Russia and the League? You know what? The Commissar isn't around, so fuck it. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. They always tell us how important it is that we be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for our motherland. But what has Russia given me? I was born in a bunker, grew up hiding from bombs and raiders, and before I was fully grown, I'd been shipped to a concentration camp because I had a big mouth. You haven't lost it. I am well aware of that, Andreev. Well, I just want redemption, and now the service brigades actually offer that. And I just don't want to die. It is the 27th of February, 1963. Lukin's exit. In accordance with General Order GL-001, Specialist Arbitration Cadre 055081 concludes. Belukin Konstantin Nikolaevich of Cadre 000-002 is found guilty on all counts of abuse of military authority and dereliction of collective duty. Defendant is hereby removed from his position and remanded to the custody of Internal Security. Cadres responsible for his detention have temporarily been placed under the direct command of Glabkoberk D.T. Yazov in order to prevent a conflict of interest. Recommended sentence is indefinite redemptionary service. The cadre finds that Belukin did on numerous occasions willfully and knowingly utilize his command authority to advance a personal agenda, and concludes that he pursued prosecution against no fewer than 16 of his own subordinates with no lawful cause and without conducting an investigation. Investigation by this cadre suggests that several of these individuals had personal disputes with him, making this an abuse of authority under Article 56 of the Codex of Military Justice. The cadre further finds that Belukin engaged in behavior that is classified under Black League military law as cliquism and dereliction of collective duty, under Codex Article 13, Section 1, and deliberately and knowingly kept critical intelligence regarding anti-national activities from his then lawful superior, Glabkoberk D.M. Karvashev, with an eye towards instead providing such information to his own ex-NKVD acquaintances. The cadre nominates one Drozdev Yuri Ivanovich, presently of Cadre 040110, to replace him, pending the approval of the defendant's immediate superior. Approval granted. It is the 7th of March, 1963. A new age. I've not seen this city so busy since the days of the Union, and I've lived through some shit, Bogdan huffed as he swept the streets, the detritus of the morning's league drill still littering the gutters. Even a lowly dog's body such as him could feel the energy in the air. Vasily, a man Bogdan would call more than an acquaintance, but not quite a friend, nodded in agreement. This new man, Yazov, he's really got it planned out, hasn't he? I guess the Black League got tired of biting its own heels. Unless you want a one-way trip to the Redemptionary Brigades, you'll bite your damn tongue. Bogdan cast his eyes askance, but they appeared to be alone for the time being. I may be a humble man from humble birth, but even I can see things are changing here. Used to be you could sweep these streets in peace as long as you threw a salute to the League when they came your way. Now I see them everywhere, eyeing me up and down, like they're evaluating whether I'd be better as frontline infantry or bloody cannon fodder, which I guess is the same thing. Vasily gave him a woefully naive look. Every city needs civilians, Bogdan. Surely they'll find a use for you that isn't quite so bloody. As he spoke, a platoon of League cadets came marching down the street. Their eyes were steel, devoid of any emotion beyond pure determination, the slightest hint of rage and hate. The two civilians stood aside as they passed, and Bogdan dropped his voice to a resigned whisper as he spoke again. These aren't just broken men anymore. They have one purpose in mind, and that purpose has no place for men like me. No place for civilians, unless I am holding a gun. Even the dregs will serve the League. It is the 7th of March, 1963. Karkaden's dismissal. In accordance with General Order GL-001, Specialist Arbitration Cadre 057235 concludes. Karkaden Alexander Ivanovich of Cadre 000-002 is found guilty of willful inefficiency in the exercise of his duties. Defendant is hereby removed from his position and remanded to the custody of Internal Security until a position for long-term reassignment has been determined. Recommended sentence is indefinite redemptionary service. The cadre finds that the defendant did on numerous occasions resist the implementations of broad doctrinal reforms and new combat tactics, many of which had, at the time, already been proven effective in frontline skirmishes. On account of this failing, Black League forces under his command sustained heavy casualties in skirmishes with bandits. This is found to be in direct violation of General Order GL-001 and actively harms the ability of the Black League to fulfill the program of national action. Decisive action is thus warranted to protect the interest of all Russia. The cadre nominates 1. Vitovrinov Evgeny Petrovich, presently of Cadre 040199, to replace him, pending the approval of the defendant's immediate superior. Approval granted. It is the 17th of March, 1963. Under a clear sky. Sophia had come to like the bombings. The grown-ups talked about them like it was a problem. The instructor of their youth cadre lectured them on how evil the Germans were and how their bombs killed outsiders on the surface. But Sophia didn't believe it. For one thing, she had never seen an outsider. She'd only heard stories, how they ate dirt, wore rags, and lived in holes in the ground instead of barracks, without cadres or instructors. Vasya, the new kid, always cried whenever they told stories like this, but everyone knew they were true. Whenever the bombs came, the sirens would start to play, and the whole cadre would be sent down into the shelters beneath the surface. So, instead of doing physical exercises or learning about the Germans, the children would run through the tunnels, playing war while the bomb sounds thumped up above, rumbling like soft thunder. But now these days are becoming rarer and rarer. Sophia and her cadre were now braving the outdoors more and more often, and these coveted playtimes beneath the earth became less and less frequent. Lectures on the Germans had become more frequent, and physical drills in the proving grounds were becoming the new norm, only occasionally interrupted by a few lonely aircraft in the sky. Playtime is over, it seems. It is the 27th of March, 1963. Somewhere, a newspaper reads, "The Yasuda Crisis." Following the release of information implicating Yasuda Holdings executives as ringleaders in a corruption scheme turned murder investigation, the Titanic Zaibatsu appears to be in dire straits. When the Tokyo Stock Exchange opened earlier this morning, the floors were flooded with frantic shareholders begging for their orders to be proceeded first and frightened interns carrying bins of sell orders through the chaos. Already Yasuda's holdings have entered free fall, and the mass liquidation of assets held on the home islands, Guangdong, Vietnam, and China, has created an economic power vacuum set to tear the sphere economy apart. Experts predict that the Zaibatsu is on life support. Unless Ino's cabinet can be mobilized to produce a miracle, a total collapse of the corporation can be expected as soon as next week. What falls faster? A man or his shares? The men stood by the sill, calmly, and waited for their turn to jump.